Welcome to episode 5 of the
Five?
Sink or Swim podcast.
We're already at 5?
Cinco.
Wow. Could you imagine if someone listened to all 5 in a row?
I don't think anyone has.
If they did, that would be pretty cool.
Well, I think I have.
I could see you doing that. Shout out Brad. I know Brad does it. That's our number 1 fan. Brad, we know you're listening.
He gave us good feedback.
Yeah.
On today's episode, I'm really excited. One of my good friends is here.
This is the second part in our series of Get to Know the Charter Class of NSUMD. I said it better this time.
You did. The first one was a travesty.
Really bad.
On the first episode of this series, we had soon-to-be Dr. Chase Labise talk all about radiology, and today we have a very special guest, soon-to-be Dr. Joshua Raber.
Dr. Joshua Raber.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you for being here.
Of course. How could I miss this opportunity to contribute to such a meaningful thing? Thanks for having me.
We're very excited to have you. You're one of my favorite people in this class.
Oh, come on.
She's not exaggerating.
True. It's not. It's true. Can I tell you something?
Of course.
They say imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Highest form of flattery, sure.
I've got a Josh accent. Can I do it right now?
Absolutely.
Is it fine?
Of course.
How does it sound? This is it. You're subtle. Just a little bit. How you doing?
There you go.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Okay.
You sound like you're from New York.
I do?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
What do you drink in the morning?
A coffee.
Coffee is right.
Yeah.
Coffee's right.
But the thing is I put milk in mine.
Half
I know.
and half. Just a splash.
Just a splash of
Just
half
a
and
splash
half?
of half and half.
What about a bagel?
Bacon, egg, and cheese.
I only like the ones that are boiled in the water bagels.
I don't think that there's
I think it fell off there.
I think those are the only ways to make bagels.
You can do an impression of me now. It's just heavy breathing and the sound of a bag of chips crinkling. Welcome, Josh. We're excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I know last time we were talking about, how the match just happened. Chase was very happy. We're pretty happy. How are you feeling? I know before we started recording, you were saying it's still kind of just settling in, which is exactly how I feel. But how are you feeling right now, buddy?
Well, I mean, I can be honest. I'm over the moon happy with the outcome. Michelle and I, Michelle being my wife, who's made it with me down to Florida from New York and has supported me in all facets in Florida. We really wanted to be here and stick around in the South Florida area. And I'm really, really happy to say that I matched with my number 1 choice at the University of Miami. And we'll be starting anesthesiology residency July 1st of this year. So I'm super, super pumped for that.
That's awesome.
They're so lucky to have you.
I'm very lucky to have been taken.
No, they're lucky to have you.
Thank
you. Hear that?
And you had a really unique situation, too, just with the logistics of your wife and you trying to figure out, it was more about location and mixed with programs. So, how'd that all boil down for you?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to just jump into the conversation about match? We can talk about that first. It's completely up to you guys. But
you lead the way, Josh. We follow you to the gates of Valhalla.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an epic comment. But I guess it's maybe better to back it up for a minute and just go back to the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's perfect.
And then maybe the story will culminate in the match outcomes and how my decisions were made in that respect. So.
That's beautiful.
I love it. Storytelling.
All right, so bring us back.
Day 1 med school. Well, no, let's go before that.
We're going way back.
Let's go way, way back.
So, let's bring us back to high school, Josh.
Okay.
What's going on in high school, Josh's mind?
No. Let's go before that. Tell us your backstory. Where are you from?
Yeah.
Tell us about your life. Tell us about your parents.
Sure, absolutely. So, I was born in Brooklyn, New York, to product of 2 immigrant parents who came from former Soviet Union, present-day Ukraine. They arrived in the late 70s under Henry Kissinger's rule and allowed for all the Jews to leave Soviet Union under religious asylum. So they came to America and decided to pursue medicine and give back to other people as well, which was one of the main motivators for myself and underlying themes in my life, to give back to other people and to go into medicine because I saw my parents do it growing up. Moved out to Long Island, grew up in Nassau County, went to elementary school, middle school, high school, all in Nassau County, New York. Spent my whole life there. High school Josh was always interested in science, always interested in math. I knew I wanted to go into medicine just for the reason that I felt really, really good inside seeing how friends and family responded to my parents at gatherings, at barbecues. I mean, people would come up to me and say, you know, you have amazing parents, and that was really impactful for me. as a young kid to hear such nice words.
What type of physicians were your parents?
So my mom's an OBGYN, and my father is an internist who also specialized in geriatric medicine. And they're both still in private practice today, which is, really nice. And
Up in New York?
Yeah, up in New York.
I love geriatrics.
Geriatrics is an amazing field.
It's,
I think old people are often forgotten about, and geriatric medicine is really, really an amazing field.
I feel like they're the patients you can continually learn from, and not in a way of like, oh, what an interesting disease, but the wisdom that they have with them from a life lived, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So I love geriatric patients.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you were kind of getting to high school. It was a great background. And then what happened in high school?
Well, I mean, like I was saying, just that I always had this underlying tenor that I was interested in science and math, and medicine was always kind of like this structure in my life where, my parents were both physicians, and people always complimented them on how they gave back to the community. And that sticks with me to this day, and I'm proud to say that they were a big drive in my decision to pursue medical school. But that's down the line. I went to SUNY Binghamton, which is a small school in Binghamton, New York, upstate New York. It's a university program that's funded by the state, so tuition was rather cheap. And I knew that I wanted to go to graduate school, so it was good for me to go to an undergraduate program where tuition wasn't too expensive, to try to mitigate some of the potential loans that one would have to take by going to an expensive graduate school.
That's great advice for anybody listening.
Yeah, absolutely, especially those that are looking at different college options. I pursued a degree in integrative neuroscience, and the reason I did that was that I was always interested in how the mind and body kind of connects. And integrative neuroscience was that beautiful marriage between biology and psychology, so it had some of the components of those two disciplines kind of integrated in one, and that's why they call it integrative neuroscience at Binghamton. And it was a very, very good program. Although I didn't like living in Binghamton that much. It was kind of cold and drab.
Where is it in relation to, like, because I'm not a New Yorker. I just think of New York City.
Sure. So it's like southern tier New York. It borders Pennsylvania border with New York.
Okay.
Like the big left side of the state.
Okay, the state that nobody, notices, the part that nobody notices.
It's a beautiful city in the summertime. But in the winter, fall, and spring, 9 months out of the year, it's frigid and very, very cold. So with that being said, I just took all the summer and winter classes I could. I finished my degree in 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's why you're so young.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
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 Yeah, I remember starting, when we started, I remember thinking, wow, this guy's really young, but really wise beyond his years. He talks
Thank
like,
you.
A 42-year-old dad with the perspective and the wisdom of a 42-year-old dad.
Thank you.
I think it's those, the hard years in the snow that did that to you.
In the tundra
Yeah.
of Binghamton.
It'll mature you.
So what was there like a defining moment, or obviously your parents were physicians and they were very inspirational to you. Did you go to medical school straight out of college, or did you take any gap years?
So that's a really interesting point. I want to talk about that defining moment for a second.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to challenge myself with respect to, is this medicine career? Is this something that I truly want to do? Is this a commitment I can make for a long term? I actually enrolled in Binghamton before I even went through neuroscience degree and everything like that. They actually accepted me as a PwC scholar in the School of Business. I applied as a business student because I wanted to create a personal little challenge for myself. Can I actually go through undergraduate business degree and still make it out to be an individual where I'm proud of myself? And I went through that first semester at business school there. Absolutely hated it.
They're rigorous. They're different.
It
right?
wasn't the course. It was not the coursework that was challenging. It was the people that I was surrounded by.
That's what I hear from everybody that went to business school. It's sort of a cutthroat environment.
Everyone's a go-getter.
And it wasn't, and the rigor was tolerable. It was just everybody felt that they could become the next Jordan Belfort, or everybody was out to try to figure out a way to make a bunch of money very fast. And if that meant to not do the right thing, then so be it. At least at the end of the day, I made a bunch of money. So that philosophy, and I don't know if that's unique to the kids that I was just with that year, or if that's kind of a common theme underlying a lot of undergraduate business programs in our culture today, and like what our society values, but I just didn't like it. So I dropped out of business school after my first semester and just went into the college and art school. And that's when I started to take the curriculum to fulfill the major requirements for neuroscience degree.
So Josh Raber, business school dropout, anesthesiologist.
Yeah.
And you said you finished the degree in 3 years. Did you take time between finishing your bachelor's and starting here?
Yeah, the fourth year, my quote-unquote senior year in college, I just scribed. I wanted to get more experience with medical terminology, with understanding the language that's used on a day-to-day basis, just the basic vernacular that is commonly exchanged among different parts of the healthcare team, and also really just understand how to take a good history. Scribing really helped with that.
I think it's interesting you say that, because I think most medical students need something as a bridge between being a regular person and being a medical student to learn the vernacular, like you said. For me, it was like being a new EMT and just interacting with nurses and doctors and like reading patient charts like for the first time and seeing medication names and just hearing reports given. Like that was my introduction.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that was kind of your introduction. And a lot of people's introduction is through scribing.
Yeah, I scribed as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Scribing is really, really great. I mean, it's good work. You learn a lot. It's taught on the fly. New things can come up patient by patient, and you really learn how to take a good history, how to have a systemic approach to organizing your thoughts and what the SOAP note looks like before you even enter medical school.
Yeah, it's like the see one, do one, teach one, but
Exactly.
You get a ton of experience in seeing it, and then once you get to med school, then you start doing it.
I personally think it trumps shadowing.
Of course.
When I see it, from an admissions perspective, I like seeing scribing, in-person scribing. I really think you get an idea of what it's like to work day to day as a physician. Not fully, but you get to see what they're doing, and you can walk through the thought process.
Yeah.
I'm still a little curious, though, about when during those, formative years of undergrad and stuff, when did you decide medical school? Like, I want to be a doctor. Was it before you went into college? Was it just kind of over time seeing your parents as role models? It's so, what do you call that word? A cliche to say like that you always wanted to do something. Because it's not always true, but in my circumstance, which I feel is unique, growing up with two physician parents who were my role models, I really, really, really wanted to emulate them because of how I know that they treated people and how people respected them and how, it was really, really nice to see people coming and thanking always. People that I never even met before would come to soccer games to hang out with my mom or my dad just to kind of hang out with their, good old doctor of the town. And it was nice. So I always wanted to do that. Yeah, I don't think that's cliche.
No.
I think that's authentic. I think what's cliche is being like, from the time I was 3 and I had my first doctor playset and I helped my sister, then I knew.
I saw the car accident and then I saw that the person was hurt. And then I knew.
And that thought of the cliche kind of stuck with me in college, and I was like, this is no way. This has to be a cliche. I couldn't always wanted to have helped people and pursue medicine. So that's why I challenged myself with this business school idea. I said maybe I'm just gonna challenge myself with this alternate path.
Almost separating yourself from the inevitable.
When I found myself like a fish out of water, I guess, among these people that I just didn't really identify myself with, and I wanted to be with the people that understood how beautiful organic chemistry can be, for example, for those that like organic chemistry or biochem. I mean, these are like things that I really liked learning about in college. And then when I found those people that were also trying to get into allied health sciences or medical school, dental school, optometry, and so forth, pharmacy, I mean, I was like, this is going to be my career. I'm going to be in healthcare for sure.
Yeah. Surround yourself with the nerds, right?
Yeah.
We're all kind of nerds.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And people that thrive in business generally are not.
Well, they are in a different way.
That's true.
They like math, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I mean, undergrad really confirmed it and sealed the deal for me. I excelled at the courses. I found them interesting. I really enjoyed orgo, like I said before, biochem. Those are like the backbones of things that I could go and tutor people on, for example. So I took the MCAT once. Yeah, I took the MCAT one time and just sent it. That was
applied,
it.
And then
Yeah, that was it.
Do you remember the day you got in to NSUMD? Like, do you remember that day?
Yeah.
Yeah? Tell us about the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the day that I was accepted. I lived in Long Island my 4th year. So this was my 4th year, quote unquote 4th year when I was scribing. I lived in a small town with Michelle called Hauppauge, which borders Nassau and Suffolk County, and she was finishing up her degree at Stony Brook.
Hauppauge?
Yeah.
Oh.
Hauppauge. Because a lot of Native Americans settled in Long Island and New York State, like many hundreds of years ago. But
Oh, wow.
it's an homage to one of the tribes, I believe.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
Source.
It's someone look it up. Look it up, Joe. I had just finished working, and she was home with our beagle, Chelsea. I think she was studying for an exam, and I came home, and I don't remember what day of the week it was. I said, let's go get some Mexican food. So I was really hungry. She didn't want to cook because she had an exam coming up. She was really hungry. It was in the afternoon, and we just had finished our Mexican food. We got into the car to go home, and in my phone, in my pocket, I feel my phone vibrate, and I saw that it was the email. I was sitting right next to her, so it was like fate. We were just in the moment together. We were sitting down in the car, and I knew she had wanted to go to Florida. So this was very good news for us.
That's awesome.
So you wanted to come to Florida because her family's down here?
Yeah.
And it's warm.
Exactly. The warm weather is one thing. It was just a pure coincidence. Her family's from Brooklyn, and they lived there forever. They also came from former Soviet Union, but they came later. They came in the 80s, and they settled in New York as well. They moved down to Florida just by coincidence 6 months prior to us starting medical school as a class, our year. They just moved down to Florida to relocate. They were tired of medicine in Brooklyn. Her father's a family doctor and had a practice in Brooklyn. They were tired of how physicians were being treated in New York, and I guess just wanted to start a new life and relocate and start a new career here in South Florida. So Michelle always wanted to move down after she learned that January that her parents were moving down.
Oh, wow. So that worked out.
Worked out perfect, because when I got that acceptance, I showed her, and she basically, the first thing she did was she called her dad. She was like, Josh got into Nova. So, I mean, there's at least a possibility that we can come down to Florida. Mm-hmm. Now it's on paper.
Wow. That must have felt nice.
And it worked out very well.
Yeah. In hindsight, it was the best decision I ever made.
Right.
Oh, me too.
So you flash forward a few months, and there you are, joining all of us in good old professional immersion week.
We were in the same professional immersion group.
I believe, yeah.
Yeah, we were.
I believe so.
It was me and you and Mason.
Yeah.
And Kyle.
Excellent memory. Wow.
Yeah.
Remember everybody.
Yeah. Me, you, Mason, Kyle, myself. Yeah. There were other people, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But yeah.
What was that first couple weeks like? That first, that ease into fundamentals. What was that transition like for you?
I was just excited. Like it didn't feel real for the first couple of minutes. And when I say minutes, I mean the first couple of days, the first weeks, couple of weeks when I came down. We went to that old school in Davie.
Right.
It didn't feel real. It was like, is this a summer camp? Am I actually going to be a medical student? Because everyone was so, big-eyed and puppy dog looking and excited. And, of course I was very happy. The transition was definitely rough. I mean, what they say about drinking from a fire hose your first year as a first-year medical student is, in my opinion, true. But it varies with different respects to what kind of learner you are. So I think it really is critical to understand what kind of learner the individual is in and of themselves the first couple of weeks, months, and going into that first semester to really become successful.
How did you take to the PBL style curriculum? Was it something that you were uncertain of or open-minded towards? And when you got here, did you like it?
I was definitely open-minded to it. And I'll tell you that I have always been more of an interactive learner. I never really liked going to lectures and watching the lecture hall type of format with 300 people in Binghamton. Because in Binghamton, that's what they did. I mean, we had lecture halls, 275, 350 people.
Wow.
For Orgo 1 or Gen Chem or, Bio 1 and 2. I mean, you had to sink or swim.
Yeah.
Oh, really? You had to...
I really wanted to just find the earliest opportunity I could.
Thank you so much.
We're only 20 minutes in. That's pretty solid.
Yeah.
So
I think you're the only one to have done that so far.
I really wanted to find a moment to throw that in there, so I appreciate it.
Mitch, did you have like 300 people in your class?
Not in like most, but I mean, UCF's pretty dang big.
Yeah,
it's
you
like
guys
one
are
of the biggest
big.
schools in the nation.
It is.
Biochem 1 was huge. Organic 1 was huge.
Yeah, these are big.
When you say
big
huge, how many people?
At least 200. I don't know the exact number. At least 200.
I had like 20.
Wow.
So when I took Gen Chem 1 and 2 at a local state college as like a transient student, and there was like
20.
15 or 20.
Okay.
Because that was like a small state school, and then University of Central Florida is absolutely huge.
Yeah.
So in those classes where, especially like, I hate to use the word like weed out classes, but the classes where like lots of people are taking, because it's like a big degree requirement,
Right.
like, Algebra 1 or like Gen Chem 1, they're huge.
Yeah.
Psychology was like close to 300, I think.
How do you get help from a professor when there's 300 people in your class?
I was just thinking when Josh was talking about different learning styles, like I remember this feeling that I'm sure everyone has it, where you're listening to a lecture and they say something that goes over your head and they just keep going. And you're just like, dang, that's something I got to figure
Learn
out later.
Okay.
And it's not generally like by going to the professor and getting like an eloquent explanation. You end up just having to figure it out on your own later.
Okay.
And that happens multiple times per lecture.
Right, of course,
Okay.
because, the professor at these institutions who are teaching these courses, they have their own higher level courses they're teaching, research that they're doing, grants that they're writing, and so forth. So, they don't really have time for, the 20-year-old Joshua to come in and have some silly question about like this general chemistry 2 reaction, like figure it out, man. Like you're not gonna. We had office hours, but that was like TAs and stuff. You know.
And we could have a whole episode on like learning styles and stuff, but I feel like the only way to get a good use out of lecture is to truly study the material beforehand yourself, and then come to lecture almost as review. I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
But if you're going in there with no background knowledge, man, you're just setting yourself up for a bad time.
Trust me, do I know that firsthand.
So, going back to that question you had about my impressions on the PBL, or if I was open-minded to it, I was, and I was excited because I always wanted to learn among smaller groups of people because I was always in these large groups of people, and I wanted to be more interactive. I love teaching. I love learning from people. I love understanding things in different lights. And in college, I read a lot of textbooks because that was the only way that I felt that I could understand the course material. I was big into textbooks, and I was really, really big into YouTube as well. Those are the two big resources that really helped me through college when I was in those big 300-person lecture halls where, like, if I had a question about something, I would flip to the textbook or I would go on YouTube and just listen to somebody else explain it, and it always helped. So PBL was exciting for me because I just didn't want the old-fashioned lecture hall stuff.
And you spend a lot of your life just listening to your parents as physicians and to, just going through undergrad where you're just constantly taking in material. And then PBL kind of gives you your first opportunity, or one of your first opportunities, to like give your own opinion on things and like work through things with people and disagree with people and state your case. And it's exciting.
Exactly. And I think PBL is really helpful actually for training medical students to become physicians because it not only puts you in that environment, it also actually forces the individual to public speak, create presentations, organize thoughts. It's very, very nice to have something like that every single couple of days, a few times a week, versus just coming to a lecture hall, 8:10 to 9:10 or something like that, and then you're out the door. You don't really kind of refine those skills, which are important.
I don't think anybody's ever put it so eloquently.
Yeah.
So good job.
Thank you.
We had a group together. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, of course.
For the for the CPR course.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember you.
I remember you too.
Yeah, I remember you. Such a great job.
Who was our facilitator
Dr. Plazik.
for CPR
Yeah.
and BBB?
Yeah, I was in every single one of his groups.
Okay,
Wait,
are
hold
you
on.
sure?
Yeah, because he wasn't a facilitator for BBB because he was the course director.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
you're right. He was the
Yeah.
course director. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we talked about this too on like a previous episode, but I think something you don't realize when you're going through PBL, because when you're like an M1 or an M2, it's PBL or IQ, it's kind of just like a responsibility you have to get done. And like, it's like a checkbox that you have to get through. But then looking back from where we are, you realize how much it kind of did prepare you for clinical rotations, like you said, case presentations, being able to state your case in front of a group of people, have people disagree with you, argue your point back professionally. Like, that stuff really does help in third year and beyond. I can't really imagine going into third year IM rotation fresh, having never done a case before.
Ever. Like, literally, like, imagine spending the first 2 years lecture hall only, and then now you're on floors.
Hitting spacebar for 2
Yeah,
years.
you know, whatever, Anki, YouTube, what was it, Boards and Beyond, all the good stuff.
All that stuff is great, but
I imagine like not even going to lecture and just being at home doing all that stuff and then just fresh going to your first rotation to see
Yeah.
humans.
yeah, so I agree.
I think PBL was definitely a good format to kind of develop those skills.
And it's not like it was 8 hours a day or something. It's
What
2
was it?
hours, three times a week.
Two hours, 3 times a week.
It was
Yeah.
manageable, and honestly, it was kind of fun
Oh, it was so much fun.
because we would just joke around
Yep.
before, during, and after. Us
way to bond.
students. It's a great way to
Your
bond.
group becomes family because here at our school, you're in the same group for the entire block.
Right.
It's not like you're changing people every session, so
Right.
you really become like a team. It's fun.
How would you kind of summarize everything before step one? Because I feel like you can break medical school up into a few different big milestones, and I feel like although there's a lot of variance in the different blocks, pre-step one is its own chunk of time. So like, how would you summarize that leading to step one?
Okay, so just so I understand you correctly, you're talking about everything preclinical,
Yep.
all of the organ system blocks, fundamentals,
Yeah.
everything.
How did it go for you? And then how did you transition into dedicated?
So my formula is not a secret. I've told this exact formula to multiple students at our program a handful of times, but it's unpopular. And the reason it is just for one thing. I consider myself a big reader. I'm a very, very big textbook reader, and not everybody is. People typically don't like to have the 1,000-page textbook where they have to read a chapter a night and kind of get through that and digest all that information. And that's why Dr. Rajput always calls me Mini Robbins, because I read Robbins cover to cover and kind of aligned each chapter with the organ system block that we were focusing on that semester or that period.
Big boy Robbins.
This
yeah,
is
Big
one of the
Boy
most
Robbins.
beautiful things I've ever heard come out of anybody's mouth from med school. I'm also a textbook reader.
Yeah.
The fact that you read Robbins cover to cover and that you're young is one of the most inspiring things I've ever.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Samantha.
This is why he's so well spoken.
I'm
You
not-
see the way you hear the way he's talking. It's because he can read long chunks of text and comprehend it.
Well, it takes patience.
Absolutely.
But do you hear like the
And-
words that come out of his mouth, like the things he says?
He said vernacular 5 minutes in.
He composes his sentences so well. Good job, man.
I
Thank
read
you.
Robbins selectively, and it's
Yeah.
a beautiful book. And that's just one book.
No, it's a good book, and I mean, it's not a secret formula. All I did, I looked at the table of contents. I said, okay, we have CPR. Let's give an example, right? We have CPR, which is our cardiology, pulmonology, and renal block. I knew which chapters in that book correspond to the weeks that we would have for cardiology, pulmonology, and renal. I would have a separate textbook for physio, which I really enjoyed reading from Costanzo.
And just for reference, for those who don't understand, Robbins is a pathology book. It's all
Yes.
about disease only, disease states.
Yeah, so Robbins is a pathology book. I had a physiology book. I had a pharmacology book that I also kind of broke down and read the subsections that were corresponding to the coursework that we were looking at. So that was my first pass on all information. I read the books. That's what I did. That's what I like to do. After PBL, I would go home. I would make my PowerPoints or I'd make my presentations utilizing the books. I wouldn't go on online sources or anything. I would just use the books. And then when it came time to prepare for exams, I would utilize my notes from those books, watch those wonderful online resources like Pathoma, Boards and Beyond, look at my first aid just as a reference. It was never that primary source that I was using. It was always just a reference. And my notes were the ultimate primary source because those were the ones that I modeled from the textbooks. And then synthesize all that information together, take the exam, which we know were MBME test questions. So they were really representative of the USMLE.
Did you incorporate practice questions into your first, like your preclinical years?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think practice questions are extremely important. UWorld is a gold standard. I also used USMLE RX occasionally. And there were also some really nice practice questions in Robin's textbook, as a matter of fact, which really helped me.
Those.
Really helped me with the pathology questions because some of those really blurry, grainy slides that you would get on MBME exams, you're like, what is this? Like, I've never seen this before. Is it supposed to be a bone or is it supposed to be a white blood cell? I don't know what it is, but thankfully, I look back at those end-of-the-book questions in Robbins, and similarly, Costanzo had similar questions at the end of its book as well. Those are crucial.
And that all prepared you for tests, and you did, fine and made it through.
Yeah, I this is not a secret formula, like I said, guys. I'm not selling any infomercial here. This is not like a, pay 4 payments of $19.99 and you get free shipping and handling. I just read the book, and when I say the book, I mean a couple of books, but I am just a big textbook reader. That's my learning style, and it goes back to whatever an individual's learning style is. If somebody's more an auditory learner, perhaps those podcasts or those audios, recorded files from Goljan, those were great too.
Yeah.
Those really helped on some drives.
Absolutely. Yeah, you and I had a lot of overlap. I remember we started talking first year, and we had a lot of overlap in how we studied. Both used Costanzo Physiology textbook, which is amazing for getting a base. And then you were very heavy into Robbins. I would reference Robbins, but mostly just use Pathoma and Boards and Beyond. I really like watching videos, even as a first pass sometimes. So, yeah, that's really interesting.
Those are great videos.
Oh, they're fantastic videos.
Dr. Jason Ryan?
Yeah.
Absolute legend.
They're excellent. They're excellent videos. But for me, I distinctly remember in the beginning watching them, and I felt like I was just missing information. Mm-hmm. So that's when I decided to make that transition to looking at the slides that were distributed from our class. And then I was like, this is not really for me. I like more blocks of text because then I can synthesize as opposed to just looking at slides.
Well, that's the one thing, there's a lot of cons to textbooks if you want to be critical of them, but one thing you can't take away is that they're comprehensive.
Extremely.
Generally.
Extremely.
They tell a story.
Yeah, and I was always the type of learner that if I didn't understand every single nook and cranny of a problem or every single nook and cranny of how does the heme work, for example, in biochem, like how does that whole heme moiety detach and reattach the oxygen, I needed to know that in and out for me to perform on an exam. Otherwise, I would have gaps in my knowledge and I wouldn't feel confident to perform on the test.
I also think, and I think that reading textbooks also sparks that curiosity that we should have as like future doctors, because you're supposed to be the one that knows the most, that understands the background, the underlying processes of things. So I think even being curious about like how does the heme synthesis pathway work, if you fall into the trap of just wanting to know what's high yield, which is really important for the boards, don't get me wrong, but there's a time and place for that. And in the middle of your organ system blocks, in the middle of heme or something, you shouldn't just be going straight to Boards and Beyond or first aid and trying to memorize the stuff for the test. You really should be working from the ground up and reading textbooks and doing that stuff and worrying about the high yield stuff later on top of that base you build.
Absolutely. You would be shorting yourself. You can do great only studying high yield stuffs, but you would be only doing great on paper. Mm-hmm. And that does not necessarily translate to you being a really well-seasoned critical thinker, ready for intern year, trying to approach problems with a systematic method, as opposed to just thinking about what's the highest yield fact I know about this disease, for example.
And then this is why step 1's pass-fail now, to address this exact issue.
And I think the way that you set up your studying is, I'm sure we could make a nice visualization of this, but like there's a spectrum of like low yield comprehensive, if you will, where like you fully understand the subject, but a lot of the stuff you just read isn't going to be testable, but it helped build your understanding.
I lived in that region for my whole first 2 years.
Right, and that's what I'm getting to.
Very low yield.
On the other end of the spectrum is very high yield first aid. Bullet points, this is what you need to know, everything's high yield. But if you start there you're screwed because you're not going to have a base. And if you live in the low yield comprehensive section, you're probably going to perform poorly on tests. So if you start there, read your textbooks, work your way through that spectrum as you get closer to tests, which is basically what you did, incorporating practice questions and high yield videos and stuff closer to test time, you're probably going to succeed and have a good understanding.
I think that that's what really distinguishes people on these standardized tests, and that's what they use to stratify kids. And I know you mentioned step one being pass-fail, which is controversial in and of itself because now it's more than likely that another metric will be used to stratify medical students, and that being probably step two, name of the school, how much research can one possibly pump out in a 21-month period or 24-month period, for example. So there are pros and cons. But I think that when you get to those big stake exams, really what's going to differentiate students from saying, I'm a 75 percentile score to 85 percentile score or even 90th percentile score is those smaller fundamental facts that may have not been high yield during preclinical years, but have taught you to approach problems in a way that you can actually look for the answer without even seeing it before in your life.
Obviously, you can't share like specific question info, but I know off the top of my head 2 or 3 questions I remember from step 2 that I only knew from just having been being curious over the past 4 or 5 years.
That's excellent.
And like very obscure stuff. I'm like, oh, I remember reading about that one time. And I think just, delving into things deeper than you may need to is actually, it pays off long term because you'll remember that stuff.
No, you do. But you may forget that stuff until you approach that problem. And then it's like a light bulb. It goes off.
Yep.
And that's when you really need it. That's when you need that information. And that's when it's really helpful.
So I think you had a really good method your first 2 years. You went into step 1.
Josh, you're an inspiration. I gotta say, I hope everybody who's listening to this, if you're listening to it in the future, maybe you're just about to start medical school here or somewhere else, please take Josh's advice. It's free.
It is.
It's free.
It really is. I can't say it's going to work for everyone, but if there are people out there that are listening who have always felt that they were bookworms, this is a really, really good thing to do. I highly recommend just read the book, organize your thoughts, make an outline of the chapter in a little spiral notebook, and use that as your primary source when you're watching those high-yield review videos or you're listening to Goljan or you're watching Sketchy, things like that.
How many hours per day did you put in, your first 2 years? What would you say?
I think more so consistency on a daily basis, I would say, was more impressive. Not necessarily hours per day, because I would give myself breaks. Let's say, for example, Monday through Friday, we had school. After school, maybe I would read for 4 hours.
Okay.
4 or 5 hours.
And generally, we were free by noon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you're done by noon, you read 4 or 5 hours, and you need to be consistent with that.
Right.
4 hours today, 4 hours tomorrow, because if you skip a day, then it becomes 8 hours in one day. And that's really not as palatable as 4.
That pancake.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
pancake analogy.
Exactly. So you need to be honest with yourself and really, really disciplined when it comes to medical school in the first 2 years with how you approach digesting all this information, because it is like drinking from a fire hose. It's a lot. And if you find a way that works for you, then maximize the strategy there.
Good points. Good advice.
On the weekends, I would take a day off. Sunday, we would spend time with the family. I'd go out with Michelle. We would do things. Saturday, maybe 10 hours, but I'd break it up 5 and 5. Do 5 in the morning, take a break for an hour, 5 in the afternoon.
I think that's so important too, and that's something I definitely was not good at first year. Got a little bit better at second year and was good at it third year, is scheduling breaks and not getting caught up in studying in that, like, let's say you don't schedule breaks, you don't schedule days off. Every day you're studying and you don't exactly have concrete start times and end times. So it feels like you're always studying, even though you're not. Your mind is always focused on studying. You're worried about the next time you have to study. Right when you finish studying, it just never ends. Versus you, for example, you get home, you're like, all right, I'm going to read this book from 1 to 5 with little breaks throughout, obviously.
Yeah.
And then maybe tomorrow I'm going to take the day off. And then
Exactly.
I'll do it 3 more days in a row. And you're very consistent, and that leads to total time studied very, not only efficiently, but a lot of volume.
Absolutely. You get more miles per the gallon, and you don't burn out when you study that way. Otherwise, if you're going to cram, you're going to burn yourself out
Like
super
a
fast.
Prius.
Yeah, you just want to coast, 5 miles a day.
Yeah,
5
like a
miles a day.
Prius on cruise control at 50 miles an hour.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
What kind of car is the opposite? The crammers.
Like a classic, very fast muscle car.
Yeah, I would say that.
Doing a burnout right before the test.
I would say that.
Literally and figuratively.
I also want to make a comment. I completely forgot to mention how important, for me at least, Anki was. I'm not sure if that was mentioned on your show before or not.
We haven't really talked about it.
Oh,
Well, you talked about it the first show, right?
I mentioned how I used it.
It's the way. For a lot of people, it's the way.
for,
Not for,
for
me.
a lot
I've
of
never
people,
used it.
for a lot of people, Anki can be used as their primary. But again, my primary were my handwritten notes
Okay.
that I took from the textbook. Anki for me was just something that I would just do before bedtime. Do 30 cards, do 50 cards
As
for
a tool.
for just that repetition at night, or I would wake up before going to school, before taking a shower, 20 cards. During lunch, 15 cards. Like it was just kind of like a couple of things that I would do instead of going on Instagram. I deleted Instagram and Facebook and all of those social media apps because that really is a time sink. So instead of reaching for those things, I would always reach for Anki as like my fidget. I guess my fidget tool would be my Anki. So.
Wow. How you get so mature and so put together?
In so little years.
So-
in so many,
in so little
seriously,
time.
I wish I was you.
No.
Yeah, no, this is, wow.
A lot of wisdom being spat here.
I know.
Well, let's skip ahead just a tiny bit.
Sure,
So you
sure.
got through step one.
Yeah.
You did well on step one. So then you go into third year.
Yeah.
What were you thinking? I mean, obviously we're talking about being a student. Your first couple years is all about learning, and step one.
Okay.
Maybe less so now that it's pass fail.
Right.
Were you thinking about your career aspirations through the first couple years? Obviously, you started thinking about them during third year. We're all kind of forced to. But what were you thinking about after medical school? What were your plans? Did you have any specialty interest in mind? Was anything sticking out to you?
I think what a lot of students do is their first 2 years or even their first week, they have the notion that they're going to be the world's 1 of 5 pediatric cardiothoracic neuro interventional radiologist surgeon. Like they're going to basically accomplish everything and anything
MD,
in
PhD,
everything. I mean, like all of the above. Quintuple board certified. So I didn't really go into medical school with that. I mean, obviously I was just excited to be a medical student and I wanted to just learn as much as I could. I remember really liking renal physiology and cardiovascular physiology, but I didn't necessarily want to be a nephrologist, for example. But I appreciated the physiology that underlies that discipline.
It's pretty beautiful.
Going in, it's gorgeous.
Yep.
It's gorgeous. Lots of pictures of ions moving across the membrane. The membranes be tough. Anyway, third year, I don't know. I went in with an open mind. I was really excited actually to do OBGYN.
I remember that,
Simply
actually.
because my mom is an OBGYN.
I remember you
and
considering that.
I think OBGYN is such a beautiful specialty.
It's the best.
That I was just really excited to deliver a baby. And I think that that's such a privilege. But at the same time, there's privilege in just being there for a patient on a dark day on the wards, on internal medicine floor, for example. So every day was really exciting for me, and it didn't necessarily I didn't really go into it like I need to do this or I need to do that. I kept my mind very open, which I thought was important along my journey.
Was anything number one in your mind of if you had to pick that day? Well, I guess I'll do this.
So when I got into the OR, when I started seeing how surgery contrasts medicine, I realized that I prefer this pace. I really liked surgery. I thought it was gross, not in a disgusting way, but gross, like you can actually see medicine and change.
It's very tangible.
Tangibility is what I meant by gross. Occur in front of your eyes, and the results are immediate. And that's what I liked. So I always maybe I should consider surgery as the vein. I guess it's either medicine or surgery, and then you have a couple of kids do psychiatry and pediatrics and obstetrics and things like that and neurology. But like the main vein is either surgery. The main two branches are going to be surgery and medicine.
It's a big dividing point,
Yeah,
branching point.
exactly. So surgery I really liked, but I was like kind of interested in a little bit more finer surgery. I always found head and neck surgery to be really interesting. And I thought that their ability to cure very, very difficult to reach tumors in the head especially and was amazing, as opposed to like lap chole, for example. Like lap choles are very cool, but I kind of got a little bit bored watching so many. I don't know. I don't know. I just I liked.
You appreciated the details.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And obviously, Samantha and I are going into internal medicine, so we don't have as like nuanced a perspective on surgery as you might or somebody else might. But I've noticed that there's those who want to be general surgeons that they like. And general surgery, from my understanding, is a lot of it is intra-abdominal surgery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Versus the niche, the more niche surgeries, I should say, of like plastic surgery, which is, I was talking with Mason, the best way we could describe it was like external surgery, like instead of intra-abdominal or intrathoracic, it's a lot of stuff on the the outside, or intrathoracic surgery or neurosurgery. They're different parts of the body that are a branch off of general surgery.
Absolutely. And that's a really nice way to think about plastic surgery. It's external surgery. Mm-hmm. I love external surgery. When I was doing surgery and when I was doing my surgery side by some of my favorite surgeries were just surgeries that were on the skin, like a lipoma, or if it was a breast surgery case, for example. I really enjoyed being external.
I felt that too.
Yeah, because that's when you get to suture, you get to actually participate, you're retracting. It's very, very cool as opposed to some laparoscopic case.
Do you think that there's a part of, because this is, for me, it was that with intra-abdominal surgeries, unless you're like the operating surgeon or like you're truly first assisting, it's really hard to like see what's going on and feel like you're really making a difference versus if it's very external, like a breast surgery or like lymph node biopsy, like you can see exactly what's going on. It's right there. You can touch it. So.
Absolutely. Tell me that after I've stood in a Whipple times 2.
Exactly.
Because you can't see anything. And they're
really
long.
Deep. It's deep. It's hard to see.
Very, very deep. So finishing third year, exactly with this logic in mind, like you described it, Mitch, perfectly, I said, maybe I should think about maybe getting a rotation in ENT because I was interested in head and neck surgery and particularly the oncology component of it.
And when, just for reference, when was this in third year?
I took my USMLE Step 2 rather early compared to my peers. I took it in June.
Okay. And
the first few days of June, I took the exam. I took May to study because we had some time off for that little, I guess, was it summer or spring break? I don't even know. We had like a month off before jumping back into curriculum. So I took that month to study for Step 2. I took the exam. And then June, first month of M4, I guess, was June. I took an ENT rotation at the Cleveland Clinic. And I really liked it.
Yeah, how was that?
It was nice. It was really, really nice. I worked with an amazing doctor, head and neck surgeon trained as well, Dr. Michael Medina. Really, really super guy.
Is this Cleveland Clinic, Florida?
Yeah, Cleveland Clinic, Florida.
I actually was his patient one time.
Really?
I know him. Very nice guy.
He's a super guy.
Yeah.
He's a super guy and an amazing teacher and extremely patient. And he let me do a lot. That's
very interesting. So, and that wasn't your only ENT rotation, right? You did another?
Correct. I worked hard that month, though. Even though I was just like an elective, it wasn't necessarily like I was on a service. There were no residents there. It was just, the practice was there. But I still worked. I still worked like 80 hours a week. And it was like, I was like, wow, like this is, I'm working a lot. But I still liked the OR, and I really liked just the airway. And I was always kind of like trying to see what they were doing with anesthesia as well, because when I would get to pre-op the patient early, it was always good practice as a medical student to go roll them back into the OR, help prepare, attach the EKG leads, put on the pulse ox, strap them, do the compression devices. Things like that are important as a student.
If you're a student listening, preparing to go in surgery or preparing to go on a surgical rotation, that's great advice. Like, even though you're not on an anesthesia rotation, in that pre-op period, surgery's not doing anything yet. So really help out the team, do all that stuff Josh said.
Exactly. So I would always kind of go in a few minutes earlier. And they have an anesthesiology residency there. and I saw how the residents were interacting with the patients. So I was always kind of peripheral to those interactions, and I was watching how they would pre-induce with certain medications. What were the medications they were giving? What were the doses? What are the contraindications? I mean, these were just questions that I had, and I was excited to learn about them. And I watched intubations and things like that. And the anesthesia plan for an ENT patient is actually quite different from a general surgery patient. I mean, that's just by default of where we're working. From an ENT perspective, anatomically, you're working around the airway a lot. So the considerations that an anesthesiologist will have to take are going to be different from, let's say, appendectomy, for example.
Pretty much always going to have to be intubated, I assume.
Yeah, except for some unusual laryngology cases.
Sure.
That's where they use a different type of ventilation. They call jet stream ventilation, which is very cool as well. I continued on in July. I did a rotation in ENT at UF in Gainesville.
How was that?
It was tough. I worked a ton, but I was exposed to really amazing pathologies, diverse patients, very sick. But I worked a lot. And again, I wasn't necessarily sold on becoming an ENT. I just kind of was interested in the discipline of the surgery. But I was also finding myself to be very interested in the anesthesia as well that they were administering. So I found myself oftentimes when I wasn't assigned to scrub into a case at UF, especially during my pediatrics week, I remember working with one of the pediatric anesthesiologists on a baby, like a 30-day-old baby.
Wow.
Who needed a trach because of some congenital anomalies that unfortunately that patient had that prevented that baby from breathing normally. They needed to have a trach when they were 1 month old. And I was at the head of the bed with the pediatric anesthesiologist, and I was just so enamored with the technical skill and the precision that this individual, intubation and pre-medication, and the physiology is different in a 30-day-old infant, a newborn, I guess, versus a 50-year-old man. I mean, it's a completely different thing.
Something you said really stuck out to me too is that even, whether you're on surgery or whatever rotation, just by having that like curious mindset and by actually caring to learn just for learning's sake, you can glean so much about so many niches of medicine. And like when you're on surgery, just by like noticing, oh, this is an anesthesiologist here and they're doing all these things I don't understand. Let me ask them some questions. Obviously don't interrupt them if they're doing something.
Yeah, of course.
If they're busy and they're working in something important. But if you have a chance to ask questions to learn. And like that could be your one time to realize, oh, wow, this field is very interesting that I'm not even on right now. Let me figure that out in the future.
Yeah.
For me, the anesthesiologists were like the saviors of the OR. They welcomed questions. They were kind. I had one anesthesiologist at Plantation General when I was on my OB rotation.
Okay.
He just adopted me. He's like, Samantha, come here. And he had me do the whole thing. I pushed all the meds to make the patient fall asleep.
Oh, it's amazing.
For me personally, I've encountered nothing but the kindest, sweetest people in anesthesiology. And those are just my limited, even the anesthesiologist that I had for my personal surgery.
Okay.
I was scared. I was scared to get intubated, but he was so cool. He was so, there's a way about them. Calming. You have to be. Because you're the one who, you're putting the patient to sleep.
Yeah.
They're scared.
Of course.
They're so scared.
Of course.
I remember waking up from my anesthesiology and the anesthesiologist was the first person who woke me up and talked to me. I remember telling him that he should run for president of the United States and that he was really awesome. And I was just kept saying some weird stuff to him. But it was his kindness and his warmth that really made me feel not a little less scared, because it's scary. And I think that's important. And I think you have that.
Thank you.
So I'm excited for you.
That's so nice to hear from you, because I mean, just your feelings alone, I felt in my rotation the following month when I did an anesthesia rotation. But before I even go into that, I want to just talk about the last couple of weeks at UF, where I had this, where Mitch, you pointed out being curious is paramount. Because maybe had I not been curious on that rotation, perhaps my career choice would have been different. So being curious may literally change your career path. Finding somebody to ask a question to, or just observing somebody perform their daily duties may really interest you, and it may literally put you into a period of self-reflection where you're like, maybe ENT is very cool, but maybe I don't want to be an ENT surgeon. Maybe I don't want to do this. And there are other things that I find even more interesting and more fulfilling. And that's exactly what happened to me. Because after that interaction with the pediatric anesthesiologist, I was just interested in continuing to expose myself to this discipline. Fortunately, our school was able to coordinate on short notice a anesthesia rotation here at Kendall in South Florida. And I mean, that was like the best month of my life in med school.
You and I were on it together.
It was so fun. I remember.
It was a blast.
It was a great month. Like I had a awesome time. I especially liked the OB week. I thought that was amazing too.
I think that month, first time rotating with you, my homie, so I was excited.
Yeah.
But that was an exciting time, I think, for all of us then fourth year medical students, I guess kind of newly fourth year medical students at that time, because it was a time where we were all kind of finalizing our career decisions. And I remember you and I having talks, Noreen, and the other students that were there with us,
Right.
preparing ERAS applications, making last-minute decisions on our personal statements,
Oh, yeah.
edits. It's an exciting time, especially, I think you and I in particular both kind of being not undecided, but having two specialties that we really liked and having to commit to one. Just a very cool time, another branch point.
Definitely. I mean, these are crucial interactions you have with peers. These are crucial interactions you have with colleagues and other physicians that are going to shape your path, shape your career path. I mean, we had conversation about this for that whole month every day. Should I do A or should I do B?
And it's important. And it doesn't even matter if the conversations are repetitive sometimes. You have to have these conversations with your closest friends, your classmates, your family, because if you don't, you may end up just picking the one that's the most convenient or that makes the most sense from that limited perspective before all those conversations, and it may not be the best choice for you, even though you'll probably succeed in either.
I remember how much you hemmed and hawed over EM versus IM.
Yeah.
My gosh.
It was, but I needed to.
My gosh, Mitchell.
I needed to, though.
You needed, yeah, you absolutely did. You absolutely did.
And Josh probably didn't hem and haw, as you said, as
No,
much.
He knew.
It was the when I finished UF, I was tired physically, but also tired because it didn't like seal the deal for me. And it was like, I'm kind of already a couple months into M4 year, and it's like, I like it, but is this me? Is this something that I'm going to make sacrifices for family, life, for 5+ years? I wasn't sure.
Was UF considered a good, like, you would have been happy to have matched ENT there had you gone that route, like a solid program?
I mean, if you speak to any applicant who applies ENT, they're happy to match really anywhere.
Right.
And if you're matching at an academic center like UF, which is arguably one of the biggest programs in like Southeast America, rather. I mean, you're going to see the best of the best types of cases there.
I think that this is an important point for anyone who's undecided, kind of like Josh and I were. Go do an away rotation at a place you would consider a, quote, dream program.
Definitely.
Or a top program. For Josh, it was ENT at UF, a great place for ENT. For me, it was EM at Orlando Health, a great place for EM. And if after the end of that month you're not convinced, it's probably not for you.
That's a great point, Mitch. If you're not convinced after seeing what it could be in the best case scenario and it's not really sealing the deal for you, I would suggest you make some self-reflection, look inside and reassess.
Absolutely.
The month of anesthesia confirmed it for me. It was amazing. I loved it. Every day I was excited to come. I was like, what are we going to see? Am I going to intubate? What medications are we going to do? It was arguably, in my opinion, at least for myself, the best clinical month for me during medical school.
And it sealed the deal, as you said.
Sealed the deal, because that's determined my career. I applied anesthesia because of that.
So let's talk about that. So I guess before we talk about how your personal application season went, if you could just briefly describe how applying to anesthesia works, because similar to radiology we talked about with Chase, there, to my understanding, there's prelim, TY, advanced, categorical, all these different terms. So how does one apply to anesthesia?
Anesthesia has changed over last several years, where it used to mostly be advanced, where you had to secure a PGY1 position and then match into your advanced anesthesia residency. However, more recently, most programs are categorical, meaning that they are integrating a clinical base year. Your PGY1 year is incorporated into that program, so now you are accepted into or matched with a 4-year program. There are a handful of programs that still are advanced, but that number is fewer than categorical.
And how long is anesthesiology training for those who don't know?
So it is 4 years. 1 year is your clinical base year, and then you have CA 1, 2, and 3, so a total of 4 years.
CA, clinical.
Yeah, it's like your clinical anesthesia year.
Right. Excellent. So how did it go for Josh? How was that process? How many places, if you don't mind sharing, you don't have to, how many places did you end up applying to? How many places did you interview at? What was that whole experience like?
I have a bit of a unique circumstance because my wife, Michelle, was applying to podiatry schools during this time. She wants to be a foot and ankle surgeon. She's applying for these programs, so we wanted to stay together geographically. Before the application cycle kind of opened, she started interviewing and finding out who was accepting her and so forth, so it really helped refine the geographies where I was even thinking about applying for programs to train at, because for me it was important to stick together with Michelle. With that being said, she had gotten accepted into a couple of programs, and one of them were in Los Angeles, one of them were in Cleveland, one of them were in Chicago, and one here in South Florida, Barry University. So I took those 4 cities. I have friends and family back in New York. I took New York programs, and I just applied to a couple of cool programs in the Northeast tri-state area like Philly and so forth. And those were the geographies that I picked. Otherwise, I didn't really apply to those programs because they were not really, they didn't align with my personal goals and values at the time.
So you started geographically, picked programs in those geographic regions, and then maybe a few others, and that's it.
Correct. I think what people fail to remember is that you need to be happy with where you go to train. And if you're going to be miserable, like if you're used to living in a certain, let's say you're always lived in a city, for example, and you can't even think about living in a rural area. You've never lived in a town with 5,000 people or 10,000 people, and that's going to drive you insane. Why would you consider those programs, whereas people who come from smaller towns prefer that? And that may align with their personal goals and values better, and they'll be happier in those places. So I think looking at where you're going to be happiest the most, and for me it was keeping my family together, allowing my wife to continue her educational pursuits to become a podiatrist while also allowing me to become an anesthesiologist was important. So for that reason, I chose those geographies.
And how many total places did you apply to amongst those geographies?
I believe it was somewhere in the, I would say high 40s.
Oh, wow.
High
Okay.
40s. So
Is that typical for the average applicant, or?
So I think that's a difficult question because now with COVID, everything has become virtual and people are applying to
Over-applying.
everywhere and anything because they don't necessarily fear having to travel there to interview, and that's not a deterrent anymore like it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So people are applying to 100 programs.
Yeah,
It's a very strange, I guess you can call it a problem, that the only thing limiting your applications is how much money you have in your bank account.
I mean, yeah, people, yeah, that's a real consideration for a lot of people.
I mean, if you got $5,000 to blow, you can apply to 200 plus programs and.
Well, not just that, but there's also a level of desperation as well, right? Imagine
100%.
you didn't match, or imagine you're coming from one of the Caribbean schools.
But imagine
You're gonna apply to.
Yeah. I'm kind of talking from the perspective of like a U.S. student. But if you are okay spending that much, you're kind of essentially guaranteeing you're going to match because you'll probably get 30, 40 interviews if you apply to that many places.
I don't even think it's necessary.
It's not.
In my opinion.
It's not.
And it may even take away from other applicants, which is not a really ideal situation. So I mean, I didn't overdo it. I applied to high 40s, which I don't know what the average is. I think maybe the average was in the 50s, maybe 60. But that's a little bit inflated with the last cycle being COVID and everything. So I don't know.
And if you're an applicant, just know that the number you should apply to, you'll have to just talk to multiple advisors and people, and based on your scores, your application,
Absolutely.
It will vary.
And the AAMC provides information about this. Their point of diminishing return study that they have on their website. You could put in your specialty, and it'll tell you.
That's a
how
great
many
chart.
Fs. Yeah, it's a phenomenal chart.
Really, really good chart.
And if you're someone like Josh, it'll help you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Samantha. I mean, it'll help everybody. Point of diminishing returns is an excellent chart because if let's say you are competitive enough to apply to 30 programs, why apply to 60?
Right.
Why?
Right.
You know, is it going to make a difference in your choice? Because maybe those first 30 programs are actually the programs you want to go to, and the 30 extra you're going to apply to are just taking away from other people, or it's just a waste of people's time, or you're wasting your own money. I don't know.
And if you're going to
you only go to one place, so why
if you're going to
overapply?
give yourself a pad in your applications, just don't go overboard, I guess is what we're trying to say too.
Yeah.
Though I needed to apply to 91 programs, just I'm not a great applicant, so it's
I
like,
think you
I'm
did.
not Josh.
You know,
think you did.
I almost cried when I saw you open up your envelope on stage.
No, I know
to-
you told me, but
I yelled and fist pumped.
I was so happy for you, especially when we spoke in the Harvey lab. We had that conversation for a few minutes in the intermission.
Yep.
I really wanted it to happen for you, and I'm glad it did.
I'm still in a state of disbelief.
I think we all are.
Yeah.
Josh and I were talking about that right before you got here. Just it's like still sinking in.
Yeah.
Before I applied, I was told by many people, like, hey, you might have a chance getting interviews at some academic places, but you're probably going to end up at a community program. Like, okay, that's fine. I'm going to be a doctor either way. It doesn't matter. So I am in a state of shock and very excited. So,
Wow. No, well, congratulations.
yeah, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
More importantly.
Thank you.
Doctor.
Doctor.
So you did, you applied to 47 places. How was, and obviously you got interviews and matched successfully, but like how was the whole process for you interviewing?
Good, exciting. Obviously, I had never done this before. Being a first-time applicant to residency, I didn't really know what to expect, so I purchased a book. And I'm like a little embarrassed to say this. I purchased one of those little books.
Hold on, I love this.
Yeah. Like one of those advisory academics.
ERAS for dummies.
Like how do you approach the interview? What
I
are the
love
questions
this.
to expect?
I love
that's fine.
this.
That's
yeah,
not-
that's
Yeah,
actually really good.
I didn't purchase a book to how to fill out an ERAS.
No.
That's not what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
referring to.
No, but
Yeah,
how
yeah.
to interview.
How to
Yeah.
interview, because I hadn't interviewed in so long. I remember we interviewed for Nova, and it was 4 years ago.
I think that's totally fine.
I will tell you 100%. It's in your personality to get that book, but I will tell you that you did not need that book.
Thank you. I appreciate
At
it.
all.
It was a short book. It was probably 90 or 80 pages max.
Okay.
I spent
all right.
$10 on it. It was one of those academic advisory published books. Here are the questions that they might ask you. How do you approach an ethical situation?
And,
I didn't want to be underprepared.
and I think you probably would have succeeded. I don't think that book was the reason for your success, but I think little things like that maybe just calm the nerves of okay, I have done something to prepare.
Agree. Even if it's placebo, even if it has absolutely
Exactly.
no effect on the outcome, it'll be good for your psyche. It'll be good for your mental state going through this extremely stressful process.
And then you won't question yourself after the fact. Like, did I say something weird? Did I do something weird?
I
'Cause
should have got that book.
This is an interesting point you bring up because interview prep, people are going to have questions about it. When I applied to med school, I had a very staunch policy of I will not prep for anything. I will read about the school, I will read about the program, but I am not going to practice anything. I took that same approach with the residency interview, but I don't agree. I don't think that people should because I had a lot of anxiety building up to match week. Like I probably said something weird. I probably made a face. I probably didn't answer that one ethical question right.
It's okay. You were human.
Right.
You were being a human, right?
I had to go in there and do it raw.
I think doing it raw, but somewhat polished is probably the balance.
I agree.
You don't want to come off in an interview like a robot, as if you've taped, a poster on your board behind the camera, for example, and like are reading line for line answers.
She asked question 173. I practice this.
You know what I mean? Like that's extremely. It's
I see
evident.
people do that, and I do interviews for our program here, and I they'll come into the MMI Zoom room and they'll be like, oh, hold on, I need a minute to prepare. But you see their eyes darting back and forth as if they're opening up a Word document, and then they just start going.
Yeah.
So don't do that.
You don't want to do that.
Don't do that.
That's not, it's evitable. You can see somebody that's reading off a script, for example.
What I did was somewhere in between you guys. I think I read some sort of like PDF of a interview tips thing, or at least and briefly, but I looked at a list of just questions, of potential common questions, just so I got an idea of what I would be asked potentially.
Yeah.
I didn't practice answers for them, but it was nice to just read questions and be like, okay, these are reasonable questions. I could probably think of something on the fly.
Right.
So yeah, I think you don't want to go too hard. I don't think any of us went too hard or did too little, but
I just jumped right in. I remember my first couple of interviews, extremely nervous. The camera would come on. I would feel like this impending sense of doom, almost like, damn, like I'm on the spotlight now. It's just me and the interviewer. And this is my career on the line. This could be make or break, for example. So I think it's okay to be nervous in the beginning, but I'm going to say that as the interviews continue to go on, you start to kind of find your pace your groove, and you start to understand the process of these things. This is new for the interviewers as well. I mean, virtual interviewing is a brand new concept, so it has its hiccups.
No one's entirely comfortable on
Exactly.
Zoom.
No one is entirely comfortable Zooming, and I think that that's probably might become the norm. But with each subsequent session, you become a little bit more comfortable with your answers, and you get better.
Yep.
And
can confirm.
I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but residency interviews feel very different than medical school interviews, which is
for sure
probably all of our
Yes.
last interviews experience, in that it's not like they you have some power in a sense, in that they are trying to sell their program to you so that you rank it highly. They want you to like their program at the end of the interview day, and they're not typically going to grill you in the interview session. A lot of them, probably 90% of them, were conversational for me.
As somebody who went through this entire residency interview season, both going through an entire medical school interview season at the opposite end, interviewing candidates for our program, and then interviewing, to get into residencies, they're completely different. They are completely different. Medical schools, they hold all the cards. It's hard to get into medical school. Only 40% of people that apply get in, versus residency, your match rates are
And
much
then
higher.
If you do, of those 40%, most of them only get one acceptance, correct?
85% get one acceptance.
Wow,
So
I didn't know
the
that.
power's within the medical school's hands.
Wow.
Versus residency, it's a two-way. They want you just as much as you want them. But yeah, they're very different. Very, very different. Which was hard on the psyche for me to sit in admissions committee meetings, hearing how we evaluate candidates, and then knowing that that's happening to me at these other programs. And so that always is in the back of my head at an interview, like, oh, they're going to say something about my background. They're going to say something about my suit. They're going to say something. So kind of haunts you.
No, I agree. But like I said before, I mean, you're going to be stressed. It's just those little things that you can do to kind of calm your psyche and calm yourself. Like you said, Mitch, what if I didn't buy that book? Would I have changed the outcome? I don't know. If I didn't get a new tie, for example, maybe they would have looked at me funny. Like, why is this kid wearing the same tie for everything? Why is his tie the same as his tie
ERAS
in his
photos.
ERAS photo?
Yeah.
Right, but these are like small things that may not necessarily be a substantial thing, but are calming to you as the applicant and, are important.
One thing that I did that I would recommend to everyone is I spent, the mic I'm using right now, I spent $130 on a nice USB microphone. I spent $50 or $60 on a nice webcam, less than $200. I made myself look presentable.
Strongly agree.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this is a must-do.
This
is a must-do.
If interviews are virtual, I I mean, there is no reason a med student can't find $200 for a virtual interview season when you would have been spending thousands traveling normally.
Strongly agree with you.
It's
Even
almost
a pre-med, I'm telling you this from this point of view. You don't get to this point and then just kind of poop out on your AV equipment.
and even to the point where if you show up using a laptop webcam at a weird angle with terrible lighting and you sound bad and your voice is cutting out, that's like points against you, because it's like, why do you present yourself like that when you have control over those variables?
You do have control, and it all goes back to, does it make a difference? Probably a little bit, but if you had not gotten a better webcam, if you had not gotten the better mic, you're going to sleep at night way worse
That's what I was trying to get at.
than if you're like, I have a better camera, my image is very good, my quality is very good, my voice is not very scratchy. This is what I needed to do to basically maximize my chances at this opportunity.
Lighting also. Don't skimp on that.
These are small things.
Very, very, very important.
Small things.
Either have nice natural lighting or get yourself a little lighting thing. My window is enough for decent lighting, but yeah, and like if at all, it'll serve as some solace to yourself of, I did something to make myself look presentable, and that's enough.
And for anybody who doesn't know, sitting in front of a window is the best thing you can do, meaning your face is facing the window. That's good natural light, not your back is facing the window.
Or the side,
that's not
that
good.
can look weird too.
Yeah, just straight on. You're staring out your window.
Use
your
the
camera's
blinds
in front
to
of you.
control the intensity of it.
Yes,
These are all
that'll
small
give you the
tips.
best lighting situation. Or key lights. I think key lights are phenomenal. And some people use ring lights, like the YouTube lights. You can use those too.
Right. So I know we're like kind of reaching the end here. Sadly, we have a little bit of
sad.
time left. One thing I do want to go into, though.
I talk too much. I'm very sorry.
Oh
No,
my
you
gosh,
don't.
no.
It's been excellent.
We love it.
Please ask me what questions you have left.
No. Nothing crazy. One thing I'd love for you to kind of share, which I think would be a good way to kind of close this out here, is if you could just talk about the different career paths. Obviously, you're going into anesthesiology like we've talked about. You'll go through your intern year and then your 3 CA years, so a total of 4 years of anesthesiology training. What are the different career paths after that, whether that be going straight into practice, going to fellowship, and then what are you thinking about?
So people can do a couple of things after they finish residency as an anesthesiologist. They can join academic practice, where they work in an academic institution, a university setting or university-affiliated setting, and act as a faculty and just do general OR stuff for the most part, and participate in teaching and so forth. Or they do research. People can also go into private practice and join a group and do general OR stuff, non-OR related things like MRI sedation, endoscopy sedation, things like the GI suite, for example. Those are considered non-OR anesthesia situations. People can also go and pursue fellowship. If they don't want to just be general anesthesia, they can do pediatric fellowship, they can do obstetrical fellowship, they can do cardiovascular fellowship, chronic pain, regional, acute pain. I mean, there's critical care medicine. There's a lot of different fellowships and career paths that an anesthesiologist can take if he or she decides that they want to pursue a fellowship. And each path has its own components and subsections within it as well.
The main ones I was familiar with was cardiothoracic, anesthesia, pain, critical care, and peds. And to my understanding, what's unique about anesthesiology is most, if not all, of the fellowships, you might have to correct me, are 1 year fellowships, as opposed to many other fields are typically 2 or more.
Yeah, generally 1 year, unless you go to a very specific program that has some research integrated where you're going to be spending a lot of time with writing grants and so forth. That may be a 2-year situation, but most are 1.
Yeah, and it's something to consider. Just if you're kind of thinking about the timeline of your career, if you're considering anesthesiology, I considered it for a few months in 3rd year. And let's say you wanted to be a cardiothoracic anesthesiologist, or you wanted to be an intensivist working in the ICU through the anesthesiology path. Both of those are 5 years total for anesthesiology plus just 1 year fellowships. It's a pretty interesting path.
What's interesting that I didn't even mention, and I just remembered it now, Dr. Rajput told me, awesome guy, by the way.
Oh, he's fantastic.
Really,
Trying to get him on the show.
You have to.
Would love to.
You have to. I would really.
He says we have to come up with a very detailed plan of what we want him to talk about. I just want him to come on.
He told me when I was speaking to him kind of as an advisor, and he asked me what I liked about anesthesia. He told me that the world's ICUs outside of the United States of America are run by anesthesiologists,
Correct.
which I didn't
I
know
had
that
no
before he
idea.
told me, about like half a year ago or 9 months ago or something like that, whatever month it was that we were talking. But I was like fascinated with that. Anesthesiologists are running the ICUs. And then I realized that anesthesia is just this really good blend of that procedure and medicine, hands-on, but also the discipline and philosophy of medicine. And that's how it really sets you up to be successful in the critical care setting.
You know what? That makes sense. As I didn't know that till you just said it, but now it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because in the ICU, a lot of your patients are sedated.
Yeah,
A lot of them are
ventilated,
perioperative.
So they're yours. Like they should be under.
sedated,
And then-
ventilated
Or-
procedures, things like
Wow.
that.
Just another perspective that's similar is I know particularly in Europe, anesthesiology is heavily involved in pre-hospital medicine, which is something I had a really big interest in for a
Oh,
long
okay.
time. They work really closely with paramedics, and they're often on, there's various things they call them, but like go teams where they'll send out a doctor into the field to maybe intubate somebody. In France, they even have pre-hospital ECMO. They send out a mobile ECMO unit,
Wow,
which is insane. It's like the only place in the world that does that. And that's anesthesiologists.
very cool.
Fascinating. Remember the guys that or the kids that got trapped in the cave?
Yeah,
And they sent out
yeah.
a couple anesthesiologists, and they went with like some SWAT or SEAL team and
Wow.
brought an anesthesiologist in there. They had like IM ketamine they were dosing these kids with through the cave. It's amazing.
that's ridiculous.
That's
I mean, that's
anesthesiology
so. I mean, anesthesia is. It's a growing field. There's always going to be further advances on the forefront of anesthesia. I mean, we're just going to become better and better at monitoring our levels of sedation. Perioperative medicine will become better in terms of its quality. ERAS has a very different meaning in the world of anesthesia than it does for medical students. It enhanced recovery after surgery. So there's a lot of research that goes into ERAS, not the ERAS that you apply to residency with. So I'm very, very excited that I chose anesthesia, and I'm looking forward to moving forward.
I feel like it's the true embodiment of medicine, to be honest. I think it's very beautiful.
It is beautiful, and it's so. I didn't know how much of a well-rounded approach anesthesia has, incorporating both medicine and hands-on facets day to day. So I'm super excited.
And keep in mind the ABCs of anesthesiology.
What are the ABCs?
The first, what is the A? Airway, breathing, cell phone. All very important.
There you go.
things.
The ABCs
Cell
of
phone, definitely.
emergency medicine, you know those, right?
No.
Airway, breathing, CT scan.
CT scan.
Ah,
definitely.
perfect.
Yeah, that's
Okay. Do not forget your cell phone when you go to the OR.
You know the ABCs of internal medicine, right?
No.
Since you brought this up, there's a lot
No,
of them.
please.
Airway, breathing, charting.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Perfect.
Also, one thing I would recommend to anyone interested in anesthesia, or honestly anything, kind of being here in fourth year, I'm trying to learn more about like the history of medicine because it's really fascinating. The history of anesthesiology
Super.
is amazing.
Super good.
Yes.
Super good history. A lot of wonderful artwork is painted on the first couple of times any anesthesia was used, and these are monumental paintings.
What was it was Ether? Is that what they
Yeah,
used?
Ether in the Dome.
Ether in the Dome.
Yeah.
That's it. The Dome is still at Yale, is it? Or is it? It's one of those Ivy League schools. It's like it is a, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a dome, it's a lecture hall with
Yeah.
a dome. Which is what they call the dome.
The ceiling or the roof is domed shaped.
Right. And the bottom of the lecture hall is where they anesthetized the first patient formally in front of a group of attendees. And it's
Yeah.
still there.
Wow.
So, there's a book called, I'm like halfway through it, called Doctors, the Biography of Medicine. And one of the chapters is on anesthesiology, as well as all the different prominent doctors like William Harvey and Hippocrates. It's really interesting.
Are you trying to come up with like talking points for when you're rounding on your IM rounds? Because they got to be long.
That's like
So is
Dr.
that the kind
High
of
level stuff.
is that the attending you're going to be? Did you guys know that the history of, is that going to be you?
No, my memory's not that good.
His
Okay, I would do that.
his
I would
medical
do that.
knowledge from a historical
Dr. High?
standpoint, unbelievable.
Guy's unreal.
Unbelievable. We had an hour discussion about latex gloves.
How about when we were on surgery, and I think it was me and you. It might have been me and Neha. I don't remember. It was me and another student. He pulled us aside just by a nurse's station, gave us an hour-long lecture by the nurse's station.
That was Neha.
It was Neha.
I remember we were at one of the, what are they called, noon conferences for surgery or M&Ms, and he busted out the number of Daltons of one of the chemicals, and when you and I looked at each other like right away. Like,
Yeah, he asked me that question too.
He did?
What's the molecular weight of low molecular weight heparin or something like
He
that?
did that.
I was like shocked.
He talked about bile for an hour, like everything gallbladder. There's so
Nice.
much, and maybe he
He's
just
very
like
smart.
recites these, but he's an intelligent guy. But yeah, I mean, do you want to be that kind of attending one day where you just have all these facts at the ready?
You know what? I might be. I usually have facts at the ready. I don't know. I'm sorry
I think
to
as long
anybody
as
in advance.
as long as you're not arrogant and you're just doing it because it's
No,
interesting, it's fine.
I don't think. I mean, I'm already old, so I am who I am at this point.
If I could do that about the heart, I'll be happy.
I think you're going to be good. And I think Josh is going to be great.
Thank you.
Can any future students, if they're listening to this and they know you're here, can they reach out to you? If they find you somehow?
Yeah, of course, of
If
course.
you can find his contact
If you
info.
can find him.
I mean, just
You
email.
know.
Just email. I guess my professional email. You'll have to Google my name and find it. I'm
And,
sure the
yeah, they
school
don't-
will
yeah.
publish it.
And they can be like, hey, Josh, I listened to your podcast from 5 years ago. I
Yeah,
mean, hey,
You'll be
Dr. Raber,
surprised.
I listened to your, I'm also a student at NSUMD. Can I talk to you?
Always.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay. Hey, you're going to be so fantastic. I cannot wait to see what the future has in store for you and Michelle. This is a very exciting time. Congratulations to her.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you again.
You are going to be that the shining light of hope in the OR, which is to me a horrible place. But you are going to be the person in there that brings it calm and peace.
That's what I'm excited about. Those few moments where you see the patient is scared.
shaking.
You
terrifying.
have a few moments to gain that individual's trusts and to change their entire perspective on that day, which may be one of the worst days of his or her life. And I think that's an incredible honor as an anesthesiologist.
And I think the two people out of our class that are going to go do this, you and Harmon, have that. You've had it this whole time. You've had it inherent within you. And there was no other way. There was no other thing for you to go do than this. So I'm super excited for you.
Thank you.
I am
very
too.
excited.
I can't top that,
Yeah.
but
Thanks, Mitch.
I'm happy for you. I'm excited for you.
That was so well said. Thank you.
It's the perfect spot for
Yeah.
you.
Thanks, guys.
And that's it, Josh. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I've really, really had a good time. Doing this was an amazing experience. I've never done it before, but I'm glad I did.
Is it fun?
Yeah, it's
It's
very
not as
fun.
bad as you think, right?
No, I didn't think it was going to be bad.
Yeah,
actually.
you never
Just didn't
know,
know what to
right?
expect.
I just
right?
didn't know what I liked it. It was a good
Would
time.
you suggest your classmates come on?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, okay.
We're really trying to hit the main represented specialties because, there may only be a few applicants for anesthesiology, but I think stuff like this is invaluable.
And we're winding down, this 4 years went by quick. And if nobody listens to this, you might in 20 years. Because what we had over these 4 years is super special. We started a med school together. There's so few of us. We're always going to be connected. And I think having this
Definitely.
on record is really awesome. So anybody that wants to come on, please just ask Mitch.
I don't know
Contact
how to.
Mitch.
I don't know how to. Don't contact me. Contact Mitch. I don't know how to explain it either, but there's something healthy about reflecting on monumental parts of your life. It's good for you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I hope that my story, my entire monologue, was not very boring.
No, it was
for
beautiful.
the listeners.
I was quiet this time because I was so engrossed in the way, and I wish we had this on video, the way you speak. And I think this has to do with you reading blocks of text, but you are so, you're not, you don't prepare what you're going to say. It just comes out of your mouth and it comes out of your mouth so beautifully. I sound, like a cretin. This is beautiful. Like the things that you're saying, it just flows.
Don't say that.
It's beautiful. So, I mean, geez,
You're very
even in
well-spoken
5
as
years,
well.
in 10 years, I can't wait. I
Thank
can't
you.
wait to
Thank
see
you
you.
so much.
When he embodies
the
the
reunion.
42-year-old dad that
Yeah,
he
when
has
he's
inside
actually
of
the
him.
42-year-old dad with the wisdom of a 75-year-old man. I am so excited for you.
Thank you, guys. And thank you, Samantha. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
And
for
this
coming
is where
on.
we end
It's been a pleasure.
Da-na-na-na-na-na-na, play out music. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na. It's our podcast. Are you gonna sink? No, you're gonna swim like Josh. He's swimming, he's swimming, he's swimming. Yeah.